His goal was to kill Vincent Fan and his wife, but now there were several problems. First, he didn't know who in their family drank milk, whether it was Vincent Fan himself, his wife, or both of them. This issue could be resolved by sneaking into the community and checking their milk box. Second, even if both of them drank milk, they might not drink it at the same time. Since cyanide acts too quickly, adding a lethal dose would take effect within minutes. If the other person hadn't drunk it yet and saw what happened, how could they possibly continue to drink? If Vincent Fan was the first to drink, it would be fine. But if his wife died and he was unharmed, it would be incredibly difficult to make another attempt later. The most foolproof method was to add a poison that could kill but wouldn't take immediate effect. He quickly had an answer in his mind: arsenic trioxide, also known as white arsenic. This was really too simple, much easier than refining nicotine or synthesizing hydrogen cyanide. All he had to do was first extract arsenic pentoxide from realgar, then heat it to form arsenic trioxide, and finally purify it. And realgar was not a controlled substance, so it was easy to obtain. With his plan set, he could take action after returning. In the evening, Chase-chan arrived at the only decent fast food restaurant outside the community, got 2 bowls of porridge without ordering any dishes, paid, and was about to find a seat when he caught a glance from someone secretly sizing him up. Focusing, he saw Xander Su still sitting in the corner, pretending to eat while actually watching him. Chase-chan glanced around briefly. There weren't many people around, and no one else was looking at him, so he deduced that Xander Su wanted to talk to him, not that Su was working with the police to trap him. Having made up his mind, he put aside his concerns and walked nonchalantly to the table next to Xander Su. Xander Su glanced at him, then turned back and lowered his head, asking, "Why only porridge and no dishes? Not feeling well?" "No, I just had a tooth pull today." "Oh." Xander Su didn't pursue the topic further, eagerly saying, "I've already told Greg Wong what you said." Chase-chan paused, then asked while eating, "Did you tell him you're Jasmine Gan's ex-boyfriend?" Xander Su frowned. "I did." "What exactly are you trying to do?" Chase-chan smiled calmly. "I won't harm you. You have to believe me. Since you've said it, then it's settled." Xander Su let out a deep sigh. Leo Lu has been arrested. Chase-chan was somewhat surprised he got arrested. Although he's Jasmine Gan's ex-boyfriend, why would he be arrested? He came to Jean County on November 20th. What did he come to Jean County for? According to him, the next day was the 7th anniversary of Jasmine Gan's death, and he came to visit her grave. "You and I also went to the cemetery that day." Chase-chan remembered seeing a bouquet of flowers on the grave when he went to pay his respects that day, presumably left by Leo Lu, and couldn't help but sigh. I didn't expect him to be such a sentimental person, coming to visit after so many years. Greg Wong had previously approached him to understand Jasmine Gan's social relations, but he didn't reveal that he was her ex-boyfriend. He's also in the chemical business, so based on these points, the police are most suspicious of him now. Chase-chan said, "Originally, when his name was reported, I only hoped the police would investigate him for a few more days, to buy more time. I didn't expect it to lead to his arrest. Isn't this framing him on purpose?" Chase-chan smiled indifferently. "How could I frame him? How would I know he would come to Jean County on November 20th? And how could I know that when Greg Wong talked to him, he wouldn't reveal he was Jasmine Gan's ex-boyfriend? Phew, then it really seems like fate is helping you. I'll advise you one more time. You should leave quickly. If you leave now, no one will suspect you." Chase-chan shook his head. "Leo Lu will definitely be released in a few days. The police won't find any evidence of his crime, or he'll have an alibi proving he wasn't in Jean County. My business isn't finished yet. I can't leave." Xander Su's face twisted. "How many more do you intend to harm? You got Leo Lu arrested. Are you planning to harm me next?" Chase-chan sighed. "I won't harm you. Originally, you were my best friend, and we trusted each other deeply. But since this incident, our relationship has grown more distant. If you don't believe me, look at this. If your English has deteriorated, I'll translate." Chase-chan took out a green notebook with some English printed on it from the inner pocket of his clothes and handed it to Xander Su. After Xander Su flipped through the first page, his expression changed from anger to shock. After a long time, he slowly handed the notebook back to Chase-chan and said in a deep voice, "In that case, I won't say more. Goodbye." "Wait." Chase-chan hesitated for a moment, then said, "In a few days, you'll receive a package. Never touch that package. Just leave it aside. If one day I get caught and the police suspect you're an informant, that package will be useful. Let's hope that package won't be needed." He nodded and smiled slightly. Xander Su didn't respond. silently stood up, his eyes slightly red, sniffed, regained his composure, and walked towards the door without looking back. Chase-Chin wore a duckbill cap and a fluffy down jacket that concealed his figure, riding a second-hand electric scooter he had bought from a dealer in Hangzhou. He had prepared many things before his first crime, not sure if he would need the electric scooter, but he thought it might be more convenient to follow people in the county area with it. The front of the electric scooter had a windscreen made at a bike shop, aiming to minimize his exposure to surveillance cameras. The back carried a milk delivery box. He had carefully observed the electric scooters of milk delivery workers, including the pictures and text on the milk boxes. He bought a storage box of a similar size, downloaded the images and text from the internet, printed them, and wrapped them around the box, making it look convincingly real. Ahead was Emperor View Garden, and it was 6 in the morning, still dimly lit, with a security guard visible inside the guardhouse on duty. Chase-Chin took a deep breath and maintained a steady speed towards the community gate. He couldn't be sure if the security guard would stop him to ask questions. If asked, he would claim to be delivering milk and could even provide the address of the Fan family's home. If not asked, that would be even better. As the scooter approached the community gate, directly in front of a surveillance camera, Chase-Chin consciously lowered his head, slightly hunched his body, trying as much as possible to be shielded by the windscreen, and used the duckbill cap to cover his face. The security guard seemed to be dozing off and did not notice someone wanting to enter the community. Chase-Chin pursed his lips and honked the horn twice. The security guard raised his head, glanced at him, then pressed the switch, raising the barrier at the community entrance, allowing Chase-Chin to enter smoothly. He breathed a sigh of relief. Perhaps it was too cold, and the security guard didn't want to come out, or maybe the guard was used to opening the gate for milk and newspaper deliveries and didn't think much of it. In any case, the security guard didn't take a close look at him from beginning to end, nor did he step out of the guardhouse. Chase-Chin smiled to himself. After all, this wasn't Zhongnanhai, and the security guard wasn't a Zhongnanhai bodyguard. The seemingly strict security was just for show, and there were always opportunities to exploit. However, he wasn't completely reassured. Perhaps this guard was just lazy. He needed to try a few more times to see if other guards treated milk delivery workers the same way. After entering the community, Chase-Chin carefully observed the surrounding terrain and features as he rode. Indeed, just as he had observed through binoculars, there wasn't a single surveillance camera inside the community, which greatly facilitated his plan. Otherwise, he would have had to deal with several more troublesome issues. Soon, he arrived outside the Fan family's home, glanced into the milk box, and saw that the real milk delivery worker had already been there, leaving 2 bottles of milk in the box. He also made note of the type of milk. Vincent Fan's children lived elsewhere, leaving only him and his wife residing here. The presence of 2 bottles of milk indicated that both of them drank milk. With that, his work here was done. Regarding this crime, Chase-Chin's plan was already very clear. Now, the most crucial task remaining was to create an alibi for the time of the crime. Just like the previous crime, the final moment would still be executed by that most important friend, who was responsible for preparing all the poisons and props. Creating an alibi was crucial for both him and his friend, as it related to the final outcome of the entire criminal plan. He had prepared for the worst, but he couldn't let his friend's identity be exposed to the police. The best alibi was to have the murderer appear in another place's surveillance at the time of the crime. The police relied heavily on surveillance footage to solve cases. If there was surveillance evidence, it would be foolproof. He first returned home, changed into high-end clothes, took his wallet, which contained 3 identity cards, one his own and the other 2 fake. Then he drove to the Pujiang Grand Hotel. Now is the off-season for the hotel industry, and the rooms are mostly vacant. He approached the front desk, pulled out his ID, and requested a room or room 806, paying for a week in advance. Upon reaching the 8th floor, he noticed a surveillance camera at the end of the hallway, directly overlooking the entire corridor. He glanced at the camera before entering his room and finally breathed a sigh of relief. The remaining work could be completed soon. He was so excited that he couldn't help but tremble all over, hurriedly taking out a pill to swallow. Jacqueline entered the office tiredly and disappointedly told Greg Wong, "Boss, on the evening of November 19th, Leo Liu was dining with someone in a restaurant in the city. We've obtained the surveillance footage to prove this. And on the evening of December 6th, the surveillance in his residential area captured him. Judging from the timing, it rules out the possibility of him making it to our county." Greg Wong sat in his chair silently for a long time before finally saying, "Then let's release him for now." Jacqueline said, however, "I feel that just this evidence alone might not necessarily prove that it wasn't Leo Liu who did it. Although he wasn't in the county, he is quite wealthy and could have hired someone to commit the murder. Aren't there at least 2 suspects?" Greg Wong shook his head. The kind of brazen murder right under the police's nose isn't something those desperados would dare to do. Moreover, this case involves a high level of technical skill, and the thugs for hire are not that professional. The murderer must be a chemical engineering professional. It's unlikely that money is the bond between the accomplice and the murderer. They must have other, deeper connections. Jacqueline was utterly puzzled. If Wu Gang and Leo Liu are both ruled out, then who else could it be? What about the list of people matching the height we looked into last time? Most of those people are currently far from Jean County. We confirmed through their workplaces and local police stations that these individuals have clear alibis for the days around the 2 incidents. Only 5 or 6 people live in the city or nearby counties. Although they also have alibis, we can't rule out the possibility of them traveling back and forth on the night of the crime. Greg Wong narrowed his eyes, pondering for a moment, then said, "For both incidents, the murderer would have needed to scout the location multiple times beforehand. It's not possible to just arrive in the county on the day and succeed. If these few people have alibis for the days leading up to the incidents, then it's also impossible for the murderer to be among them." Jacqueline said helplessly, "If that's the case, then everyone on the list has been ruled out." "Everyone?" Greg Wong said. "Are you sure everyone has been ruled out? Is there anyone on the list who is currently abroad or unreachable?" "A few days ago, there were a few, but we've managed to contact them in the past few days, and they've all been ruled out." "How is that possible? How could this be?" Greg Wong's expression suddenly became grave. Everyone who matched the murderer's height had been ruled out, leaving no one with the possibility of being the criminal. Could it be that I was wrong from the start? The murderer is not Jasmine Gan's classmate, but someone else, or perhaps someone not born into the chemical engineering field, but who delved into chemistry halfway through. If that's the case, then how do we find the murderer who has never shown their face or left any directional evidence in this vast sea of people? For the first time, he doubted all the judgments he had made about this case. Greg Wong sat in his chair motionlessly, silent for a long time, then let out a long sigh and called Dr. Chen. As soon as he entered, he asked, "Old Chen, is the murderer definitely someone with a formal education in chemical engineering?" This. Dr. Chen was unclear about the leader's intention and was a bit at a loss. "It should be, I guess." "What do you mean by should be?" "Well, the first time, the murderer hid sodium metal in the box to destroy the money. This chemical reaction should be known to high school students, but extracting sodium metal, especially extracting and preserving it without exposing it to air, is a complicated step requiring strong experimental operation skills. I don't think someone without formal education could have such methods." Later, the nicotine and hydrogen cyanide, both of high purity, were likely also extracted by the murderer. This isn't something you can learn from a high school chemistry textbook. Although just these points alone can't rule out the possibility that the murderer found the methods through self-study. But if that's the case, first, self-learning to extract poison isn't unusual, but what's unusual is extracting poison exceeding the concentration, which requires very professional experimental skills. An intern forensic scientist who studied chemistry at the undergraduate level told me he could extract these 2 substances, but the concentration wouldn't be so high. He suspects the murderer might have been involved in professional chemical engineering research work, even understanding the principles of chemical engineering equipment. Second, inorganic chemistry is taught in middle and high school. Since the murderer came for revenge for Jasmine Gan, the murderer's age wouldn't be too young. If the murderer self-learned to extract poison, then he probably wouldn't have thought of the clever inorganic chemical reactions of sodium metal reacting with water and then dissolving aluminum foil. So, after comprehensive judgment, I said the murderer is formally educated and has been engaged in the chemical industry for a long time. Greg Wong carefully pondered Dr. Chen's analysis again and nodded to Jacqueline. "That's right. Old Chen is correct. There's one thing we must be determined to stick to: the murderer must have a formal education in chemical engineering. We cannot deviate from this investigative direction. But, among the students from Jasmine Gan's previous and following years, everyone matching the height has been checked, including those across the country and abroad, and none have the possibility of committing the crime." Jacqueline still seemed to doubt this analysis and reasoning without substantial evidence. Greg Wong smacked his lips and said, This only proves that we have missed something when investigating Jasmine Gahn's social relations. In that case, Captain Lin assigned someone to re-examine all her social relations from the beginning, including relatives, colleagues after work, and even ask her school teachers more in-depth questions. All right, I'll do it. Jacqueline's response seemed somewhat reluctant. Greg Wong understood. After working on the case for so long without even a glimpse of the murderer's shadow, the murderer's taunting words over the phone were vivid in his mind, casting a shadow in the hearts of all team members. Moreover, they have yet to grasp any substantial clues, and all investigative directions are based on this hypothesis and reasoning without substantial evidence. As long as it's based on hypothesis and reasoning, it's impossible to guarantee 100% accuracy. Even Greg Wong himself couldn't be 100% sure that the murderer definitely had a formal education in chemical engineering. It was just a more likely possibility. What if it's not? He dared not think further. If the current premise of all their investigative work is wrong, then they are all working in vain, and the case might become an eternal unsolved mystery. Although he felt that the victims were quite despicable, they didn't deserve to die. He wouldn't let this arrogant murderer get away with it, which he couldn't accept both emotionally and rationally. He understood Jacqueline's thoughts and knew the current criminal investigation team's lethargy towards this baffling case. Dragging on for a long time without progress in solving the case, every time a suspicious target appeared, it was ruled out within a few days, which is hard for every police officer to accept. What needs to be done now is to keep his own emotions stable and remain optimistic to motivate the entire criminal investigation team to continue their spirited pursuit. Greg Wong is not a cunning official who can please everyone in the officialdom. Although he is in charge of criminal investigation work, he knows that sometimes his team members don't fully listen to him. The deputy directors in charge of public security and economic investigation have subordinates who are very obedient because those two departments are the most lucrative positions. In comparison, the criminal investigation department's personnel suffer the most and sometimes face dangers. Besides their regular income, they mainly rely on case-solving bonuses. However, Greg Wong is too straightforward. Even though he sometimes does favors for other bureaucrats, he always tries to maintain his sense of justice, which is incompatible with the current officialdom. This has also led to him not being favored by his superiors, so every time he applies for a case-solving bonus, he only gets approved for 30 to 50,000 yuan, which is barely enough when divided among dozens of mouths, causing complaints among his subordinates. Compared to the deputy director of criminal investigation in the neighboring city, Gao Dong, who leads his team much better. His father-in-law is the secretary of the Municipal Political and Legal Committee, and even the superiors are very polite to Gao Dong. In addition, Gao Dong is a well-known criminal investigation expert in the province, having solved countless major cases. Following him not only makes it easy to get promoted, but also, when he applies for case-solving bonuses, he gets approved for hundreds of thousands of yuan at a time, making his subordinates even better off than those in the economic investigation team. Greg Wong was transferred to Jean County a few years ago because of past disagreements with his superiors. The criminal investigation team was not built by him from scratch. Now, including Jacqueline, the reason why a group of people still diligently work on cases with him is partly because his straightforward personality is appreciated by some lower-level police officers. On the other hand, everyone knows that Greg Wong is a criminal investigation expert. In recent years, every major criminal case in Jean County has been solved without fail. Even if the perpetrator wasn't caught, the target was successfully identified and became a national wanted criminal. Greg Wong always credits his subordinates for every success. The criminal investigation team also knows that it's difficult for their boss to get promoted, but for them, accumulating merits for a few years and getting promoted is no problem, so they still follow Greg Wong's orders. Seeing Jacqueline's tired expression, Greg Wong took a deep breath, mustered his courage, and said with a smile, "Captain Lin, do you feel like this case is making no progress and that solving it seems hopeless?" Jacqueline quickly shook his head. "It's only a matter of time before we solve it. It's just that we haven't found conclusive evidence yet, and some people are starting to feel pessimistic." Greg Wong smiled. It's understandable that everyone feels this way. Solving a case is like playing mahjong. Sometimes, you wait for a card that never seems to come until the very end, and you start to think that maybe the card you're waiting for is tightly held in someone else's hand, making it impossible to win. But then, just as the game is about to end, that card suddenly appears. Solving cases is similar. It requires patience and waiting for the right opportunity. No matter how difficult the work is up front, once the right opportunity comes, everything will fall into place instantly. He continued, "When I was young and just started as a police officer, I worked on a murder case that kept me busy for over half a year before we finally caught the murderer. If someone commits a crime, they will inevitably be caught sooner or later. Being a police officer requires not only meticulousness but also patience, especially in criminal investigation work. I've been handling cases for over a decade, and I've dealt with at least 50 to 60 murder cases. So far, only 2 cases remain unsolved, but those were serial killers who were eventually caught by police in other areas. Among the murder cases I've handled, not a single one has gone unsolved. This time, it's a typical revenge murder case, and it won't be an exception." He paused, then added, "Right now, we might not have much substantial evidence, but the most crucial thing is to stick to the right direction in solving the case without wavering. That direction is to firmly believe that the murderer comes from a chemical engineering background. Including Jasmine Gaughan's classmates and colleagues, there are only about 180 people with such a background. If we investigate each one thoroughly, it's impossible not to find out. So, you must have confidence and continue to delve deep into this line of investigation. I guarantee that the murderer will soon surface." Hearing this, Jacqueline's spirits were significantly lifted, and he said firmly, "Boss, I'll start the investigation right away. I won't let this arrogant murderer get away." Greg Wong nodded in satisfaction. "Right? I won't visit Leo Liu then. Find someone to apologize to him on my behalf, and also tell him that all information about the case cannot be disclosed to anyone. The murderer is very likely one of his classmates. If he reveals anything to others, it will cause trouble for us, the police." Chase Chin had been delivering milk for 3 consecutive days, encountering several security guards. Each time, just like before, the guards let him pass without a second glance after seeing the milk box behind his electric bike. It seems that winter truly is the golden season for committing crimes. Not only does wearing more clothes and accessories like hats and masks not arouse suspicion, but it also prevents surveillance cameras from capturing one's face. Moreover, everyone's guard is down, preferring to stay indoors rather than venture outside. It seems that getting into the residential area is already taken care of. The next step is to continue working on establishing an alibi. He took out his phone and checked the weather forecast. A cold front was on its way, with rain starting tomorrow night and occasional snow. This cold weather was expected to last for a long time, with rain and snow forecasted for the coming week. Chase Chin smiled. The opportunity had come so soon. He returned to the hotel and paid attention to the surveillance camera positions in the lobby and at the front desk. Having understood their layout, he stayed in his room for a while before leaving the hotel, got into his car, changed into tight-fitting clothes to make his bulky figure appear a bit slimmer, applied some makeup to make his skin look whiter and younger, and added a fake mustache and some sideburns. He wore a duckbill cap, pulling the brim slightly down to cover his forehead. After checking his appearance in the mirror and feeling satisfied, he confidently drove to the street outside the hotel and walked towards it. Upon entering, he slightly lowered his head to prevent the lobby's surveillance from capturing his face. Then, he approached the front desk, similarly tilting his head to avoid the cameras, with his hands in his pockets, not wanting any identifiable part of his skin to be captured. "Excuse me, I'd like a deluxe standard room. I prefer staying on the top floor. Do you have any rooms available there?" A staff member smiled, nodded at him, and asked him to wait. Another quickly checked the software and replied, "Sir, we have deluxe standard rooms available on the 9th floor." "Oh, then that's fine. I stayed in your 906 last time. If it's available, I'll take that one." After checking, the staff member said, "Yes, it's available. How many days will you be staying? And please provide your ID for registration." "I'll stay for 3 days." While saying this, Chase Chin kept his head down and his hand behind the counter to avoid being captured by the surveillance, pulling out a fake ID from his wallet, and added, "The magnetic strip on this ID seems to be damaged. Sometimes it doesn't scan." The staff member tried scanning the ID, and indeed, it didn't work. Looking at him, and seeing a resemblance to the photo on the ID, especially with the sideburns, the staff member didn't suspect anything and said, "I'll just enter it manually." After entering the information and finding the ID number correct, a detail Chase Chin had already tested in other hotels, where fake IDs are made with real numbers and photos, the staff member manually registered him. Chase Chin paid and successfully received the key. With all preparations complete, all that was left was for the cold front to arrive. This day was December 20th, tomorrow would be December 21st, and the day after tomorrow, December 22nd. In the early hours of December 23rd, Greg Wong was awakened by a call from Jack Lin, who sounded very urgent. "Boss," the police station in the county town called. Their chief, Vincent Fan, and his wife have both died in the hospital after unsuccessful resuscitation attempts. The doctor determined it was acute arsenic poisoning, and they've reported it up. Arsenic poisoning? Arsenic. Greg Wong immediately woke up, all sleepiness gone. Vincent Fan, damn, it's related to the He family case again. Which hospital? Okay, I'll head there right away. Greg Wong quickly got out of bed, told his wife to take care of the kids, and said he had to rush to a major case. He was anxious and knew that this case was completely different from the previous ones. The previous deaths were mostly family members of officials, and even then, they were family members of deceased officials, reported to the City Bureau as ordinary civilian homicide cases. This time, the death of the chief of the county town police station, a member of the public security system, and considering the Fan family's significant influence in the official circles of Jean County. This case had obviously turned into a shocking major incident. The police station chief and his wife being killed together would surely cause an earthquake in Jean County's official circles. Coupled with the previous double homicide cases of the Jiang and Li families, which official wouldn't feel endangered? All the blame might fall on him, the deputy director in charge of criminal investigation. Greg Wong swallowed hard, feeling nauseous but forcing himself to hold it in. After a month of frustrating investigation work, they had made no progress in solving the case. The murderer, after killing the Li family mother and son and lying low for half a month, had started acting again. While they had assigned protection to several potential targets the murderer might attack, all were safe and sound. Instead, Vincent Fan, the police station chief who knew about the case, became the next victim. This was a serious matter, a very serious matter. It was uncertain how many would be implicated, and it was inevitable that he would be held accountable. The criminal investigation team members who had been working overtime to investigate with him would likely suffer criticism and repercussions as well. For a moment, many troubling thoughts surfaced in his mind. He wasn't concerned about how to face his superiors tomorrow. His priority was to rush to the hospital. Upon arriving at the First People's Hospital, several criminal investigation team members were already standing outside a resuscitation room, with people from the county town police station guarding the entrance. Inside, white curtains had been drawn around, and a few patients and their families were curiously whispering and watching from a distance. Greg Wong glanced angrily at the onlookers and headed straight inside. Jack Lin and a few others immediately gathered around.